we can start. Cool. All right, so welcome guys to this workshop. So today we'll be doing React together. But first, I wanna thank the careers team for making all that possible for us to have this kind of workshop and to share knowledge. It's really cool. So I'll introduce myself first. So my name is Ahmed. I am a front-end developer. I've been doing that for 5-6 years now. I've been doing React, especially. I've been to the University of Montreal, and then I graduated. I started working for several companies. So yeah, always using React, and right now I'm working with Swift Connect. And by the way, I have my buddy also in the chat right now, doing the workshop with us. He's a senior dev, but he's welcome. All right, so that being said, we'll start. So I made the presentation. We'll go through it step by step. So I know you guys are not very familiar with the front-end frameworks and not very familiar with React, so I'll be mostly covering the basics. By the end of this workshop, you'll probably be able to do simple stuff, but cool stuff with React. It's gonna be the most important stuff and how to do them. Right, so how this is gonna work is first I'll tell you what React is. Just a little introduction, and then we'll be diving into the React basics. After that, once we get familiar, with some concepts, we're gonna start coding. So we get our hands dirty, and we go on Sandbox and we start doing the fun stuff. After that, I'll give you a break so you can grab some water or coffee or fresh air. After that, I'll be talking about design system and styling with React, because it's a very important topic. Then we'll take our code, like whatever we did, and we'll add styles to it to make it look cooler. And last thing, I'll be introducing you to some more advanced concepts. So we won't be really diving deep into that, but just as informations, right? Yeah. So what is React? So React is a JavaScript library. It was made by Facebook, and its purpose is to build user interfaces. So usually we use it for websites. And what it does, it builds single web applications, right? So single web application, it's let's say it's a new way of creating websites. So the legacy way, the way that we all used to, is you basically create pages, right? So let's say you have your home page, and then you have another page like about us or whatever it is. So you're going to create each page separately, and then depending on the URL, you'll be sending that page to the user, and then the browser will read the page and will display it. So single page application, it's a bit different, because at the end we have only one page. So we don't create many pages and then we display them based on the URL, but we have only one page, and we change the content of the page. So it's always the same page. So let's say you're in the home screen, right? When you try to navigate to, let's say, about us, well, it's not a different page that will come up, but it's the same page, but with a different content. So that's the main difference. It's as simple as that. And also one thing to mention is that React, I know you guys did some workshop on JavaScript, I think, and some CSS, but usually in the real world, we don't use React with JavaScript. You could do it, right? But it's much better. Like, if you're trying to get a job, you better get into TypeScript. Like, this is my advice for you. And what Typescript is, it's basically a superset of JavaScript. So it does exactly the same thing. Let's say, I don't know, used to declare variables in JavaScript, you write something like const, my variable equals something. Well, it's the same thing, but you can type it. So you guys know how messy JavaScript is, right? Like you can declare a variable, you can assign a string to it, and then you can go below in your code and change it to a number, and that might, you know, screw up your whole code, and you end up into endless debugging. So TypeScript avoids that, and I'll show you an example of what TypeScript is. So I'm just going to code sandbox. You guys can do that with me now. We'll need it later. So you can do it now. You can create, if you go to code sandbox and you click on create sandbox, it will choose like a model like this, and you can just select templates, right? So you have this one here, which is React, and you have this one, React TypeScript. So just to make things simpler, I chose to do it in a code sandbox, because otherwise, like, we'll need to install the environment, and it depends on your operating system, and then you guys might run into problems, and we will be out of time. So we click on React TypeScript, and it will generate a template. So don't mind all this. Like, you don't need to understand what's going on right now. I'll just show you. If I create, like, let's say, a TypeScript file. So you see the first difference is a JavaScript file is .js, right? But a TypeScript is .tx. Well, you say that's very obvious. So let's take our example. I said I wanted to declare a constant, which is, I don't know, I'll call it my variable. Then I'll assign a number to it, right? So now if I try to do something like this, I try to put a string into it, well, I will have an error. So it won't even compile. It will tell me that you cannot, oh, my bad, it should be a variable, so it's let. So it will tell me type string is not assignable to type number. So at the end of the day, it's helping me coding, because sometimes you will be doing crazy stuff, and then you probably forget something up there in your code, and then you try to assign it to something else, and then it will tell you no. Well, you basically can't do this. If JavaScript will let you do this, but then your application, your web app won't work correctly, and then you will need to debug, you know, and go into stuff, and it will take like 20 minutes just because of something like this. So this is what TypeScript does. And there is also some stuff that you can do with TypeScript. Let's say I wanna type my variable. It goes like this. You put the 2 points, and then you go number, right? If I want it to be string, I go like this. I say it's a string, and then I'm assigning 1 to it. So it's gonna tell me no, but type number is not assignable to type string. And this is very useful with React, because you'll see a bit later that we pass the data in a kind of tree. So sometimes we lose track of what the data is, and TypeScript will always tell you what's the type of your variable, and also it will help you code in a way that, if, let's say, if I create an object, right? I'll just really, like, don't mind what I'm typing right now. You'll understand everything later, but let's say here I'm creating an interface, and I'm saying I want my interface to have a property which is X, and I want it to be a number, and then another property which is Y, and I want it to be a string, let's say. So this is like the object notation of JavaScript, right? So if I create an object and I call it X, or, you know, I'll just work on the X. I got my object, and I say my object is of type props, right? If I do control and space in my IDE, it will tell me what properties we can use in the object. So this is really cool, because I can go x1, and then I go I world, right? And now if I want to use the properties of my object, I can also access it like this. If all I need to do is I write my object dot, and it will show me X and Y. It will show me all the properties that my object has. So with JavaScript, you will always need to remember what's the property name is, and you will need to write it manually, right? So sometimes you can make a typo and then you end up with some kind of undefined and something really annoying to debug. All right, so this is mostly TypeScript. It's just, you know, typing stuff. If you guys ever did like Java or C# or stuff like this, you probably know that you always type your variables. All right, so that said, we'll be diving into React now. So you have some basics of TypeScript. So now let's see what React is and how it works. So first thing, to understand React and to understand how it works, we need to understand what the DOM is. This is very important because it's all about the DOM actually. So DOM is basically a programming API for HTML and XML, as you can read in the screen. So it defines the logical structure of documents and the way document is accessed and manipulated. So what does that mean? That might sound a bit weird, right? So let's say we have our HTML here. You guys probably know HTML. And you have a table and rows, and then you have your TR, and you have your cells inside, and so on. So the DOM is basically, you can see it as a tree representation of this stuff, of your HTML. And why is it useful is because you can access each node separately and, you know, manipulate it the way you want. So you don't need to create a new DOM every time. You can just use that API and change whatever needs to be changed. So it's very simple. That's what the DOM is, basically. Some people will probably put it into like, they will be talking about it for 5 minutes, but honestly, that's all it is. That's what the DOM is. And in React, so we have in every website, we have the DOM, right? So if you have HTML and you have a website, then you have the DOM. So what React does is it makes a copy of that DOM, right? And it calls it the virtual DOM. So manipulating the DOM is very, very slow. It takes a lot of time, and if you try to manipulate it directly, it's gonna be hell at the end, right? Your app will be so slow and nothing will work as expected. So React, they make a virtual DOM that's much faster to manipulate because it's just, you can see it like as a like a lightweight copy, right? It's written here. It's lightweight copy that doesn't have that power to change things, but it's just only purpose is to compare to the real DOM. And how it works is that every time you have a page, you have your DOM, React will make a virtual one, and it will compare both. So let's say something changed, the user clicked on a button or something, and something needs to be changed, it will compare these two. So you have that tree over here, and then you have that tree over here, and then it will compare them, and it will see exactly what changed between these two. And that's the only thing that it will change at the end. So it's not gonna create a new DOM or, you know, make a whole new one, but it will just change the little part that needs to be changed. And that's why it's so fast and so performant. And that's also what gives you the native app feel, right? Like a website is basically like a legacy website, an old school website. Every time you click on something, then, oh, okay, the page loads. I'm gonna ask the backend of the server for a new page, and then it loads, and then you end up with a new page, and it's very slow. But if you have an app on your mobile, like once you click on something, it does it straight away. And that's exactly what React does. at the end of the day, it gives you a really nice native app feel. So how is this possible? Like what makes React compares these two DOMs and re-render, right? Like that's the key point actually. And it's because of two things. The first one is called the state. So the state, it's self descriptive, right? It's a state. Like what's my current state right now? So it's basically where you store property values that belongs to the components. Let's say, I don't know, you had a bad day, you're not feeling good. So what's your current state? Okay, you may be sad, or maybe it's exactly the same thing. So it will store the property of the component, and wherever the state changes, the component re-renders, and that's when React compares both and says, okay, my state changed here, so I'm gonna see, okay, what do I need to change? I need to change that, fine. The props is kind of the same thing as the state, but it's not proper to the component. It's something that's coming from outside. It's like, if you guys know functions takes arguments, right? So the props, they're like arguments. Or when you have HTML, let's say you have a div and you give it a class name, like this is an attribute, right? The prop is the same thing. And every time the prop changes, the component re-renders as well. So these are the two things that are responsible of React knowing that something changed in the virtual DOM, and then it updates it to the real DOM. So I know saying it like this is a bit, it's not very clear. It's just words. So let's see it in action. Let's take a real example of how it works. So let's say I have a component. So a component is just, it's something, right? It could be like a button, it could be a div, it could be an input, anything. And that component, it has a state, right? So it has a state, and the value of the state is 0, let's say. So my current state right now, at this time, is 0. And the component is showing, hi, I am a component, and my current state is, and it is showing the value that is here. So if I have two buttons, so one to increment and one to decrement, and I click on this one, what will happen is that it will change my current state. This does something like current state plus 1, right? So my current state will be 1. My current state changed. Now in my view, in my display, I have 0. So once the current state changes, the component, it will re-render. Something changed, it re-renders, it will compare. It will say, okay, so I have a title here. Hi, I'm a component, I'm a current. Did it change from the previous page? No, it didn't. So what about this one? What about this 0 here? Is it the same as my previous DOM? Oh, it's not the same. Now it's 1. So it's going to be showing 1. So if you click on decrement, it's the exact same thing that will happen. So this will change the state first, set it back to 0, re-renders again, and then from the re-render, you have a fresh new value, which is going to be 0. It's as simple as that. All right, so I showed you React component as big square. That doesn't mean anything, but the way we write components is React. We have two ways actually. So there's a legacy way. So people who started doing React in, I think, 2016 or something like that, that was the, like, if you wanted to have a state within your component, that was the only way to write a component. And it's very annoying. It's like a class, it's using ES6. I mean, you need to extend, and then you need to pass like the constructor, everything that you know about the POO, right? And then you have this function here that will render whatever you want. So it will render, in this case, hi I am a component. So this is legacy way. This is, honestly, I've been in maybe 3-4 years, I haven't seen this. So I would say it's pretty much useless. Like maybe sometimes in very rare use cases, you might need to use one for whatever reason, but mostly you will be writing components like this. And we call this a functional component. So as you can see, it's a function. That's all it is, right? It's just a function that has a name, takes arguments, and returns something. That's it. That's pretty much it. So yeah, you would say, okay, so it's cool. Component is a JavaScript function. Yeah, right. But what does it return? Well, it returns something similar to HTML, but this is not HTML. This is called JSX. So JSX is pretty much the same thing as HTML. It's, you write it the same way, but there's few differences in the attributes, right? Like if you used to write HTML, I think to give it a class name, I think it would be just class. You don't add like name or whatever, but here you see it's written class name. And yeah, and one thing that is very important to keep in mind, the component will and should only return one container. So you cannot do something like this. Let me show you. Let's close that. Go to the app. So as you see here, it's this exact same thing, right? So just ignore the export default. This is something else. But function app and then return something. So you see it's returning a div. And inside that div, you can put whatever you want, but you cannot do something like this, right? You cannot return two divs. That's not possible. It should return only one element. And if you want to return like multiple elements, then you will need to put it as children to your first element, to your container. Or also one good thing is called React Fragments. If you don't want to do like this, right? If I don't want to do wrap everything in a div, then I can just get rid of div and write it like this. And this is called the React Fragment. You can also write it like this. It's React.fragment. Fragment, it's the same thing. You can just leave it empty, and like whenever you need to return multiple elements and you don't really want to nest them, it's like different things, maybe siblings, you'll just go with a fragment. So this can be very useful as well. All right. Common way function. All right. So now that we know the basics, this is like, guys, this is all you need to do to build React applications. This is all you need to know to build React applications. And I'm not even joking. You're not going to go into a very high level of complexity, but if you know that concept of state and props and re-rendering, you're good to go. You can write cool stuff and you can make really cool websites. So all right, let's start. I'll let you go to code Sandbox, do the same thing that I did. So create, choose the React Typescript template. So I'll give you a few moments to do this, and we will actually, whatever we did here, we will do it in the code, right? So take 2 minutes to have your thing ready. All right, so our first exercise, what we'll be doing is we'll be making a counter. By the way, you can find this in the React official doc. They use that example as well. It's very straightforward and very easy to understand. So what we'll be doing is we're going to be making a counter starting at 0 with one button to increment and a button to decrement. So exact same thing here, right? And so yeah, so first will be, let's change this to maybe like world. Let's keep our title. Let's get rid of that content here. And let's start. So the first thing that we need is a button, right? So we need button, one to increment, and another one. I'll just copy paste to decrement. That's it. And we want to show 0 here as a start, right? We want something to appear like this. So this is just text. So we'll be creating a variable, and this variable will be showing here. So we can do something like, if I go const counter maybe, and I go 0, or, you know, since we want to change it, I'll just go let counter equal 0. And oh, by the way, the brackets, what you see me doing here, when I do brackets like this and I type counter, that means that I want to display the variable, the value of the variable. This is how we do it in JSX. You go open bracket, the name of your variable, you go closing bracket, and this will display the value, right? So because if I just go like counter, then it's gonna show the string. All right, so I can do something like this. And now I will need a handler, right? So every time I click on the increment button, I want my 0 to be 1, right? And then 2, and then 3, and then 4. So let's create that function. We're gonna call it handle increment click. By the way, this is, if you're not familiar with it, this is the arrow function. It's just another syntax to write functions. So maybe you're used to this one, where you just go function and then you write whatever you want, and then you just open the brackets. But this one is another one, and it's better for the scope. I won't go into details, but it's usually it's better. So handle increment click, and what I want to do in handle increment click, I want to go counter equal counter plus 1, right? This is what I want to do. So I want to create another function to handle the decrement. And let's call it handle increment and handle decrement. And I'll be doing the same thing, but now I'll go counter equal counter minus 1. Right? So I have my two functions, and I want to call this one when I click on this button, and I want to call the other one when I click on the other button. So go click, handle increment, and then I go click and handle decrement. So as I told you, this is JSX, right? So JSX, you can pass attributes. It's like the HTML thing. And here I'm just passing on click. So this is an attribute straightforward from JSX. And what it does is whenever the button is clicked, it will call that function. That's it. Same here. So what do you guys expect will happen if I click on increment? Do you think it will be 1? Let's try. So I click, nothing happens. I click again and nothing happens. So yeah, now I'm confused. I'm like, okay, what's going on? I'll console log. I'll make sure that my function is being called. So I go for, okay, console log, calling handle increment, right? Okay, let's see. Well, it's being called. All right, if I console log my counter value, yes, so I see it's 1. It was 0, now it's 1. So the reason it's not changing is because it's not stored in a state. So React will never know. You remember that thing we talked about, that it needs to be in a state if we want React to re-render the component and show the right value? We're not doing it correctly here. We're just having a variable, mutating it, so nothing is happening. It will never re-render and it will always stay like this, even though the counter is going up. So what we need to do is, instead of having just a variable, we will be using state. So the state, the way you write this is you go like this, use state. So this is, as you see, it's imported from React. So it's a function that React gives us. So we're using the state, and the value it's an array. The first index of the array is the state itself, whatever you want to have there. So you can call it, you can even call it like this, but good luck. So I'll call it counter. And then the second one is the function to change that state, right? So I'll go set counter. Why? Because I cannot just do this. I can go, okay, I'm using the state, and then I want counter to be counter +1. I can't really do this. It will tell me it's a constant. You really can't modify it. And this is because of TypeScript again. That's why it's so useful. And we should also never, and I mean it, never mutate the state in React. You should never do something like this. If you have a state, you always change your state with that function that it gives you. So we're gonna call it set counter. All right. So now this doesn't make any sense, and this doesn't make any sense. So let's get rid of all that, and let's see how can we change our state in React. So as I said, so you go const array. This is the state. This is the function that changes the state, and then you go use state, and the parameters that you pass to use state is your initial value. So if I go 0, then my initial value when the components mounts, when the component starts existing within the DOM, the initial value of the state will be 0. You can go -1 or 1, -1. I can put whatever I want, right? And I can not put anything, and then it will be null. The value would be nothing, basically. So we want our counter to be 0, and then we want to use that function that useState gives us, which is set counter, and we want it to be counter +1 to increment, right? And to decrement, we go set counter, and we want it to be counter -1. That's simple. Now, there is another way of writing this, and it's a safer way. Instead of just passing the value, the new value that we want to set counter, we can do something like this. We can do set counter, and instead of passing a value here, we will pass a function, right? So this is a function. Basically, if I take this and I put it here, it's the same thing. This is that and that, right? So we don't need to define it since it's in the parameters, it's a callback function. So we'll just go to pass a function. As a parameter, it has the pref state, and then we can go return pref state +1. So this is exactly the same thing, but instead of using counter from here, from the big scope, we use counter from within that function here. So we're always sure to have the latest state, because sometimes you might have like 10, maybe 15 states. I'm exaggerating, but you might have a lot of states, many states, and then you start doing re-render here and there. And at some point, your variable here won't catch up with the later states and you can run into bugs. So this is safer. We're not obliged to use it. If we go like this now, it's gonna work because our program is not that complicated yet. Okay, so now I have everything set. If I go increment, now I see it's re-rendering. So I have 1. If I go increment again, I have 2. Increment again, I have 3. Decrement was 1. I can literally go forever with that. I will never stop. I mean, until it ends, the number ends. All right, so that's pretty much it for the state. It's really that simple. Okay. Just declare it. You just set it with that, and then you just show the value here. So now I want you to do something. I won't be doing it right away, but I want you to try it on your own, which is a second exercise. So I'll give you a few minutes to do it, and then we'll do it together. So let me explain. The purpose of that is basically I don't want to go below 0. I don't want to go to -1, and I don't want to go more than 5. And to do that, I need to disable that button. And there is a property called disabled on the button. So this comes straight from the button, like the HTML button, the JSX button. If I go disabled like this, you can see I cannot click on that anymore, right? And I can pass a value here. So the way to pass, this is called the prop, by the way, and we'll come back to it. And the way to pass it is always between brackets. So you go disabled equal, and I go true, let's say, right? Disabled equal false, let's say. And now it's not disabled anymore. So yeah, I want you to disable this button when we reach 0 and enable and disable this button when we reach 5. So I'll give you a few minutes to do it, to try it yourselves. So I hope you were able to do it. It's very simple. So what we do is we pass Boolean in here, right? So we want to disable the increment when it's 5 or more. So let's go and do counter. Problem with my keywords. So counter 5. By the way, it's never read. Here's how you run into problems, but I think it's because it's the other way around, like this. Yeah. So now we're at 6. So we see our counter is this button is disabled. So if you go this, you go to 4, you go increment, and it disables it. Same thing here. So disable, we can go counter less or equal 0. This is like, you can go even like this, right? Because it will disable it. It's the same thing, right? Like when we reach 0, you won't be able to click anymore, so you won't be able to decrement the state. But just to be safer, we go like this. And why is because if we ever have like a starting state of -1, and we have something like this, then you'll see I'd be able to decrement it, right? So just This is just the logic of how you want your program to work. So very simple. Okay, so third exercise. This one is gonna be a little bit tougher. It's gonna be a bit harder because we will be using the props. So what we will be doing is we want to move these two buttons here to a separate component. So we don't want them to be in the same file anymore. But we want to keep the handlers in here, in that file, and we want to keep the state in that file. So we can display it. Basically, we just want to move this part to a separate component. So this one is a bit more tricky. So I'll help you guys do it. I mean, we'll just do it together. So first thing, we want to create a new component, right? And a new component means a new file. I mean, you can create it in the same file, but usually the convention is whenever you're creating a new component, it better be another file. And this is one of the good things about React is you can separate your code, right? You know, when things are, you know, broken down into small pieces of codes, if each file has like 20, 30, maybe like 40 lines of code, then it will be more readable. If someone is reading your code, or even you, like you create something and you go back like 3-4 months later, and you probably forgot what you did, right? So you wanna always make sure that your code is clean and readable. And also at corporate level, you know, like people, they won't like you very much if you write very complicated code. I'm telling you this by experience. We already had this. Anyway, so we'll be creating a new component. So we'll be calling it buttons component.j6. I'm not very creative with names today, so I'll just stick with that. And first thing I want to do is create my component. So you guys know this already. You just go button component, and then you go function, right? Arrow function. I could have wrote it the same way as here. I could go like function app and all that, but this is better, trust me. And I will be returning, as we said, J6, right? We need to return J6 if we want it to be a React component. Otherwise, it won't be React components. It will just be a normal JavaScript function. So const buttons component. So you saw here, I named it the same thing. So buttons component, the name of the component and the name of the files are the same. And this is also very important. This is like a convention. Like I could write whatever here, but the convention is to always name your component name the same name as your file, and you always start with the capital letter. You don't name a component like this because this will not work. So you go capital letter, buttons component, and then we create it, right? And the second thing that we want to do, so after we created our buttons component, we want to be using it in app.tsx. So we need to import it here. So to import it here, we need first to export it. So we go, this is just silly keyword, simple. We just go export const this. And that means once you add this, that means that this file here will have access to it. It will be able to import it, right? So if I go import and I go buttons components from buttons component. So this is my file name. You see that I imported it. And notice the brackets here. So you see I'm importing React here without brackets, use state with brackets, and buttons component with brackets. What's going on? So very simple. If you export something like this, export const, then you will import it with brackets because you're like referring to that. But if you export it as default, if you go export button component, default button component, and I can even remove the export from here, I can remove the brackets like this. And basically, whatever you're importing from here, it will be the default thing. So I can have like many things, right? I can have like cons, another thing, right? And like this, and then I'm returning something else. And I'm exporting this. If I import default without brackets, that means it will always refer to this one. But well, we do it sometimes for default imports. Like it depends on the people on how they want to use it. Some people, they just do default exports on the components. Some other people prefer to export it like this. So this is a matter of preference, but they both work the exact same way. Just pay attention to the brackets. All right, so now we have our component. We want to be replacing these two buttons here by button components. So let's remove them and let's add them here. Okay. So here I will be calling buttons component like this. And this is the exact same way as doing div like this. And by the way, if you're not planning to put anything, if you're not planning to pass a child, you can just do a self-closing tag like this. And this will be also a div. It can be a button as well, right? So same thing here. The component that I imported, I'm using it as a GSX element now. I'm using it as a component, as something like button, like table, like whatever it is. And the reason I'm doing self-closing tags is because I'm not planning, I can do this and this will work fine, but I'm not planning to pass any child. I'm not planning to write anything in there. So I can just go with self-closing tags. And some people, they do this, but come on, like why would you add this when you don't need it? It's just gonna be more code and more annoying for people to read. All right, so I imported my buttons component here, and you notice I'm having errors. So this is what we were talking about last time, earlier. I'm trying to return two different elements, siblings. That doesn't work. So what I need to do is wrap it in a fragment. So like this, fragment, and button, turn, counter is not defined. Okay, that's fine. So now we have our component, but we are missing counter. We are missing this handle, right? This handler as well. And the way to do this, if you guys remember what we talked about here, is the props. So we said the state is when it's within the component, and when it's outside, it becomes props, right? And whenever it changes, then component re-render. So that's perfect. Let's use the props. How do we do that? So simple. You pass it here as an argument, so props. Now I have Typescript screaming at me. He's saying, oh, but your props are any. This is the power of Typescript. So I will declare an interface, what you saw me doing earlier as well. I will call it props. This is my interface. And I'll tell Typescript that my props should be of that type. So my props, they should be whatever I want. If I want, I don't know, if I want counter as a prop, and I want it to be a number, that means you cannot pass anything else. If I go here, it will say, oh, but property counter is missing in type, but it's required. So it will tell me that I need to put counter, I need to pass counter, and that it needs to be a number as well. If I go string, it's not going to be happy. So, okay, no, I only accept a number. Fine. So let's pass our counter. So this is the attribute. This is the value of the state. And what do we need else? So we need also handle increment. So what is handle increment? Handle increment is a function, right? This is what it is. It's a function that takes nothing and that returns nothing. Because we're doing this is an instruction. We're executing this, but we're not returning anything. It's like we're doing this return, and that's it. Or you can go return now or whatever it is. So it's a function that takes nothing. So let's say a function, my arguments are empty, and that returns void. Void is to say it's not returning anything. It's just a function that will execute some piece of code, and that's it. And handle decrement as well. I'll go like this, and it's basically the exact same function, right? Yeah. So handle increment, handle decrement, and now we will be passing these two things, these two functions that we declared in here. So handle increment, handle decrement. You see how Typescript is helping me with completing the things. We won't have that with only JavaScript. So now it's fine. This one is still complaining though. It says counter. Yeah, it's normal. So we said props. So usually if you want to access our props, we would do something like props, since it's an object, right? It's an object that has counter, handle increment, and handle decrement. So we can go props dot, and we will see all the values here. So what we can do is change. A simpler way is just to go props dot counter and props dot handle increment. And you see all the errors are gone away. So here we go same props dot counter and props dot handle increment, and that way it will work the exact same way that it used to, right? But it should be like this, right? Yeah. Okay, so now it's working fine. Personally, I don't use that a lot. I don't do it like this. Props. I do something called destructuring. I don't know if you saw that in JavaScript, but it's very useful. So instead of just going like props like this, it's like doing something like this, equal props, and you separate the keys, right? You take counter, you take handle increment, and you take handle decrement like that. And then instead of going props, I can just now use the values as I used them before. So props, I can use it like this. So you can do it like this. This is also fine. Or you can, instead of just, avoiding having another line, you can just destructure it here. And it's basically the same thing. Instead of going const and then equal props, this is props anyway, right? So I will destructure it. And it will be counter, handle decrement, and handle increment. Like this. 3 times. Yes, because I need to tell him that it's of type props, obviously. Right, and usually you will see things like in typing in TypeScript, what people do is instead of going like this, they type the component and they go react.fc props. This is more advanced stuff, right? Like that way I can just get rid of that and it will know that this component here is taking these props here. But as I said, this is like generic types and we're not gonna go into that. It's more advanced stuff, but all you need to do is basically destruct your props here, declare your interface, make everything clean in it, and here we go. And then we have it. It's working fine. So yeah, this is the state. Again, this is the state handler. This is what changes the state. And these are the props. Simple as that. All right. So this was our last exercise for the first part. I'll let you guys have like a 5 minutes break or 10 minutes break. You can get yourself a coffee, some water, or maybe fresh air, whatever you want. And we'll be back with the second part, and the second part will be cool because we'll be doing beautiful things, right? Like we'll be using design systems, we'll be using styles. So it's gonna be really cool. No more, stuff like that. All right, so it's 8:32. Let's go back at 8:40. All right, 8 minutes, and we'll finish the second part. So we'll wait for 2 more minutes and we'll start the second part. All right, 8:40. Let's start the second part. And before starting the second part, I want to tell you that there is a lot of web applications, like websites made with React, ones that you use very often, like Facebook. Obviously, they invented it, so they use it. And the other one that's really cool is Netflix. So Netflix is using React. So everything that you see in here, this is made using React, right? Like this animation, these sliders here, and notice that everything is a single page. Like basically, you see the URL changing and everything, but this is all one single page, and that's why you can have like this cool animation thing. You know, when you switch between pages, it's like so smooth and so fluent. So it's really cool. It's like one of the best examples with React single page applications. And there is also other libraries and frameworks to do this. You probably know Angular, you probably know Vue. These are the two most popular. But yeah, React is the one that's used the most between all these. And if you want to see, there's one also cool thing, if you guys want to compare between packages, you can just go here and you can see how many people are downloading it, right? So this must be July 3rd. Wow, it's a big drop. Probably because of vacations. And then you have Angular, I think it's core. You can compare it as well. So you have React is in orange, right? So it's yeah, much more used than Angular. And the good thing about using a popular library is whenever you're stuck, whenever you're trying to do something and you're stuck, you can always Google it, and there will be like a big community around it to help you, right? You guys probably know Stack Overflow. There is like docs, and there is like a lot of tools also made for React, right? And one of these tools is what we'll be talking about now is the design system. So there's design systems made specifically for React. And what it is basically it's a set of components. So let's say components, it could be like an input, a card, tables, buttons, you name it, right? Drawers, whatever you want. And they're already styled and customizable. Like if you want to change the colors and change the borders and stuff like that, you still can do it. But you're able to build something beautiful without using any CSS and without using any styles, right? You will still be able to do something very decent. And it was thought by designers, so it's a really cool thing. It's very UX and convenient. So what I'll be showing you today, the one that I use the most, and I think it's super friendly. Like when you are a dev, the doc is on point. Is ND. So ND, this was made, I think, by AliExpress. So it's Chinese. And the other one that's very popular, it's Metal UI. So I'm pretty sure you guys already saw this design before, right? This is Google who made it. So if you go on Gmail or any Google website, you'll find the same styles, and they even offer that on mobile and for cross-platform designs. So what is it? I'll go through ND. So it gives you a component. So you have, obviously you have the doc. It tells you what browsers it supports and so on, and how to install it, how to add CSS, all this kind of stuff. And you have components tab here, and this is basically they're showing us what components do they have and ready to use, right? So they have buttons, icons, typography, they have dividers. You can do a layout with it. You can have an affix. You can even have breadcrumbs and pagination. You have selects, and everything is designed in a way to look cool and to support accessibility as well. So if you ever had to design something like this, if you had to create a library like this that has all these components, it's gonna take years. Like if you want to do something decent, it's gonna take years. So as you guys know, we don't reinvent the wheel. So we always use popular design systems. And I know a guy working at Google, and I think they spent around 6 months doing the button, and just the button, just to make it accessible, and make sure that it doesn't break under any browser. It's really hard to do it. So, well, thanks ND, thanks Google for making all this kind of stuff. All right, so we can have a look at it. It looks like this. So let's say you want to use a button. It gives you examples of what type of buttons you can have, right? There's like a lot of variants, dash, default, danger, respecting. There's even the hover effect, right? The color, and you have the API here. So the API is basically the props that you can pass to that component, right? So as we saw together in our custom component, we're passing handle increment and handle decrement and counter as props. It's same for these components as well. So they take props and they change the way they behave based on props, and that's why they're customizable. So what we will do now is we'll try to use ND to change the buttons, make them look better, having better styles, make it look cool. And we'll also try to do some custom styles, right? So you're probably familiar with the approach of creating CSS files and then giving class names to your HTML tags. And then in the CSS file, you will probably like write, whatever CSS you want. Like if I go to JSBen, like literally this approach. So you have the HTML, you have the CSS, and then you go something like, I don't know, here. So in the body, I can go like P, like this, hello world, and then you will give it like a class. I think it's like this class. It's not class name anymore, and you give it let's say, and then you do something like this, and go color, yeah, and it will change the style. So you can do this in React as well, but it's not very very convenient, let's say. Why? Because let's say you have a big project. Let's say you're making something like Netflix, right? And then you start giving class names. Let's say I want this, I can call it red or whatever it is. And then I make another file, another file, another file, and the project will take years and years. So there's chance that you will end up with conflicts in styles. There's chance that you'll name it the same class name. So people came up with the solution for that is to generate a unique class name. But there is even a better solution, which is called style components. And style components, basically, it wraps our component and it injects style into it, right? So a very good approach would be using style components. So it's a separate library. So it's a JavaScript library, and all it does is encapsulate that component and only giving the styles to it, right? So that way, you have a clean code, it looks good, and you will never run into styles conflicts, right? And the syntax is very simple. So you import it from style components, and then you create your component, your wrapper, like style div. So you go style, whatever you import, and then you go .div, and then you just inject you write the CSS. So no need for class name or whatever. The code is always clean and looks good. All right, so let's start by adding ND. So if you're on code Sandbox, you go here and you write under dependencies, you add ND like this. This will load a little bit, and then now I think it added it, so I can go import button from ND. And notice how the button is in capital letter, and our button here, it was in normal. It's not an uppercase, because this is the button, the default button that React give you, that the browser gives you, and this is the custom component, like kind of the same thing that we made here. So we want to import it into the buttons component file. All right, and we'll just change all this button. We'll just change it to button like this. And you might ask me why, like, how do I know this? Well, it's very straightforward. If you go to their doc, they will even give you the code, right? So they will tell you, you need to import button from ND, and then you use it like this. And you can pass the properties to it. Well, this is all the properties that it takes. So you can pass them. Right, so you see that nothing changed in the styles, but that's very normal because we also need to import their CSS file, right? Because like this is not doing anything. We don't have the CSS file to actually apply the style. So it will give it like their own class name and all that, but nothing will happen. So I'll go in the index. I'll just import it at the higher level, and this is the import that you need to add. So I'll send it in the chat so everyone can add this. So you can add it to index.tsx, you can add it to app.tsx. It's up to you, but it's always better to add it at very high level. So that way it always wraps all your components and the style is always present. So yeah, that's all we did. And notice how our buttons changed already, even the disabled. Now we have like this cursor here, and on hover, we have this this cool effect. So this is basically their styles. This is their design system. So we can do other variants if you want to change. So instead of like creating a button and then styling it and do all the stuff that probably millions of people had already done it, we'll just add the props. I don't know. I think it's right, maybe. I can go, I want this one, the increment to be primary, and it will change the color. So no need to do CSS or anything. So that's why you guys can build pretty cool stuff with just a design system. All right, so we want this to be primary. We have the disabled here. So we changed it to ND. This is great. So now let's add some space, let's say, between these two buttons. And unfortunately, well, we can't do that with props because that's all we have. All right. So that's all we have. So we have type, on click, target, size, shape, all that. We don't have the spacing thing. So we're gonna need to do this manually, and we're gonna do it with style components. So we will also add style components as a dependency. So every time you add a dependency, is like your see it this way. A dependency is like a piece of code that was already made by someone that had this need before, and he made like a piece of code that does that thing that we need, and they just deploy it on for everyone to use on PM or whatever. So you can always import it into your project. So yeah, let's add the style components, and see it's loading here. Now, once we added the style components, we're gonna import style. This is, if I go to their doc and then go style components, this, well, this is how I learned all that. Basically, it's import style from style components. They have a really cool doc as well. Like you guys, you can't really get lost in that. It's pretty short and pretty straightforward as well. So yeah, we're gonna do as they said. So import style from style component, and since we're using Typescript, we're running into an error because Typescript is missing the types. So all you need to do is add the types, go add types, and then you go style components like this. And this will add the type. So Typescript now will know that, well, we'll know the type of this library. And usually when you're running your project locally, and usually like sometimes you will need to install the types manually, but if you're using like a package manager, you know, like npm yarn and all that, when you do yarn add or npm install style components, it will install everything that you need with it. It will install the dependencies and everything, so you don't need to add the types. But here we're on code sandbox, so it's a little bit different. All right, so now we're gonna create our style. So always referring to their doc. What did they say? So okay, so if I want to be a button, const button equals style dot button. So this is when you want to use, let's say we wanted to use our button that comes with the browser, the one from HTML. We can just go style dot button, right? And you can see they have like div and they have like span, everything. But if you want to use your own component, well, you will pass it as an argument. So you will pass it as style becomes a function. So like just dot something, but you open the parentheses and you go button like this, style button like this. And let's say I want, I'll be more precise. I'll go style increment button, and you do these little, you know, these things here. So it's not that, it's this thing here. I don't know how to call them. And you just go your styles, whatever you want. And instead of using button here, we will use this instead, right? So this becomes style increment button, and it will render the same button. But now if we do some styles, like let's say margin right, I want to have a margin right of 16 pixel. You see how it, you know, it applies it, and we can inspect the element. And to understand what happens is it added a class, right? This is a class. It added a class to our component in the DOM. So in our HTML, so we have that button here. It added it, so it has like class from end, right? This is end button and end button primary and all that. This is coming straight from end. When you import the component, they already have this. And you see how it added this class here, that one. Do you see something? And this is our styles. So this is behind the scenes. This is how it works behind the scenes. But in our code, it will always be like this. It really looks clean. So, right, you have it here and you just use it here. So no need to go like class name, equal, and then you go in the CSS file and you do all that stuff. Annoying stuff. So, all right, so we go with a button. Let's say maybe we want to have all this in a card, and card is very common in design. Card is something like this. So you can always use this search bar and look for whatever you want. We can maybe wrap it in a card to have that kind of border thing. So we'll do the exact same thing. So we will be importing style components into our app.tsx as well, right? So we have our styled. Now we can, let's say, our styled container style the div. I just want it to be a div, so no need to that. But if I want it to be a card, I can just go like this and import the card from ND. I can just import it like this. Card. Now it knows that this is what we're looking for, and of course we add these things here to inject the CSS styles in here. And now let's wrap everything. So maybe the hello world with the button in our style container, right? With the contour as well. Style container. Now it's a card. So you can see it. It's like a full screen card. This is probably because of some CSS here, but it's a full screen card, but you can see like the border, and you can see it added like some kind of padding in there. You know, we didn't have that padding. If I go back to like this, you see we didn't have a padding, we didn't have spacing, we didn't have a border. So I just go like this, put it back, put back these styles. This. Right, so now we have a cool card, and let's say we want to display our H1 here. We want, you know, to use the component from ND, which is called Typography, instead of right. So this one here. So you know they have like really nice stuff. They tell you like H1, H2, right? How you create them. Like basically, I can just go like title like this. Something. So yeah, I can go title like this instead of this. I can go title, and notice how they destructured it here. So we can, instead of destructure like the way we did with props, we can just go typography dot title like this, and then typography dot title like this. And we'll call it. So if you want to change, you know, the level like H1, H2, just need to go like level like this, 2, 3. So it's really cool. And this is actually the beauty of React, right? You can just have like components. They're there. They have props. They take props, and you can customize them the way you want. Like if you wanted to do like, if you want to do this with CSS without like React, we're doing like pure HTML, and we had no design system, well, we would be doing like a lot of CSS, and that would take us like 5 minutes or something just to have the thing that we want, right? So counter, let's put this one in the title as well. Title. I always adds it twice. Okay, and then we go level equal, maybe we want 4 for this one, and maybe you want to add like some spacing on the top, right? So like this. So we will create another styled component. Well, it's gonna be styled counter maybe. And we go styled and typography dot title this, and of course instead of writing it here like this, we'll just use the name of our style components, something like this, right? So it didn't change anything, but if I start adding my styles, so I'll go margin top, I'll go for a margin of 16 pixel, and you see it moved. Really cool. And what we want to do as well, one thing that would be cool to do is maybe we want this, like the 0 here, we want it to have different colors. Let's say if it's 0, we want it to be red. And if it's a number like 1, 2, 3, we want it to be green, right? So we can do this dynamically as well in the style components, right? So all we need to do is to pass a prop here to say we want it red or we want it green, right? So let's call it is 0, right? 0. And when you're passing props to a style component, you always do the $sign before. So Reacts know that this prop is for styling purposes. And it treats it differently, and it will avoid throwing an error. So is 0, we go counter equal 0, right? So it will say, yeah, you cannot pass this prop because it doesn't exist. Doesn't exist on typography.title. So we will need to add this manually. And the way you do this is just you add these little brackets like this, and you go is 0, and this is because of Typescript, right? So we go is 0, and I want to say it's a Boolean, and now we stop complaining. So I'm saying my style counter is taking a prop. It is a typography.title, so it takes all the props from typography.titles, but also I'm adding is 0 as a Boolean to it, right? And here I go color, and now this is the tricky part. So this 0, and then we say if 0, then we want it to be red, else we want it to be green. Okay, so what I did here is just instead of, and this is also one of the cool things of this component, like the style components, is that you can do styles dynamically. Whatever you have in your state, then you will you can render different styles. And the way to do this is basically like, if I'm doing this, this is like I'm trying to put variables instead of CSS, and it's a function like this that returns something. So it could be just a function that returns red, and then in the arguments you will have whatever props you asked him to pass, right? So this is basically what I'm doing. And now I see it's not applying, so I will inspect it and see what's going on. Okay, so I see the red is being overridden by this style here coming from end. So I can just go with the important tag. This is the fastest way to overwrite stuff. And sometimes you will need it, especially if you do style component. And if I go to increment, oh, I still 0. Didn't expect that. So 0, counter equals 0. Let me debug this real quick. So to see what is going on there. So counter is 1, counter is 2. It's fine to me. 0. So let's do it differently. 0. 0. Okay. So yeah, guys, you always, most of the time, I would say maybe like 30% of the time, when you're coding, it's always debugging. You do stuff, it doesn't work. So it's not 0, it's false. I don't know what's going on in there. Very true. I know, right? But yeah, it's supposed to be 0. Well, I'm running out of time, so I won't be debugging this, but this is basically how it works. This is how you render different style. But what I can do is maybe I can try one last thing. Is I'll pass counter instead here, and I'll go here, and I'll pass a number, and I'll just do the check inside, right? So there's no 0. This becomes counter. Oh, I know, actually. I know. Counter. This becomes number. I thought I had it. Didn't work. Anyway, so this becomes counter here. We're taking. And now we're saying counter equals 0. Then you give me red. Since it doesn't. So what is it complaining about? Oh, okay. I think I know what's going on. Something like this. So this will be cross. This will be cross counter. Yeah. Oh, it's still not working. Right. Anyway, I won't take more time for that because we need to dive into advanced stuff. But usually this is the part. I don't know, it's maybe because of code Sandbox or I'm making an error here, but anyway. Let's go back to the more advanced concepts. I think we still have maybe like 20 minutes left. So I'll be explaining this at a very high level. So I won't be doing any examples. I won't be confusing you guys. This is already too much. So the advanced concepts, I want to talk about the React life cycle. So we know that when we change the states and the props, the components re-renders, right? But there is a life cycle into that. It doesn't like, it's not like instant, boom, we render and that's it. So what happens is when you initialize the component, when the component is first created, it's going to set up the props and state. So this is the first thing that happens. And when the component is mounting or is more like in the process of mounting, you have 3 life cycles. So you have the first one is component will mount. So this will happen before the components mount, and then the render, and the render is basically the return here. This is the render. It's going to render this. And then it will tell you, okay, component did mount. So let's say, maybe, I don't know, I want to do something when the component mounts, or I want to do something before the component mounts, or like when it's about to be mounted. Well, I can use these life cycles to achieve that, right? And when the component is updating, so if it's the props, first thing that will be triggered is component will receive props, and then it will tell you like should component. Let's say, for example, I'm passing like 5 to my counter here, right? Like let's say when the prop is 5, so when this is 5, I don't want to update it. Well, you can do that in here. Should component update? I can go should component update. If my prop is equal 5, then I don't want it to update. Then your prop will be 5, and the component will stay the same. It won't update. But if it's true, if you wanted to update, then it will give you another life cycle, which is component will update, and then it will re-render, and then it's component did update. If you ever want to say do something after the component updates. So same thing for the states. It will call, because basically we said that the state is within the component, so there is no component will receive state, right? So it starts straight away at should component updates. Yes, okay, then you update, render, and then component did update. And the last thing is when the component is unmounting, then you can use component will unmount. So I can go into more details, and I can do more advanced stuff and make a class component, do all that, but it's very confusing for now. Like if you're not very familiar with React, if you didn't like do some React, it can be really confusing and it can get you off React. But honestly, like we don't really use these that often, and especially with the new version of React, we use something called hooks that we'll be seeing right after, and it makes it much easier. Like you do this anymore. You just call a hook that's called use effect, and then you do your magic in that hook, right? And what a hook is, well, it was added to React version 16.8. It just allows the function component to access state and other React features, or maybe custom hooks. And because of this, class components are generally no longer needed. And that's why I told you class components are the legacy way. Because let me tell you something, right? So what we did here, this is called a hook. As simple as that. This is literally a hook. This is a React hook. And all it does is basically whenever the value changes, we render. And you can make custom hooks, right? You can make hooks with your own logic. Let's say you want the component to update whenever the screen size changes. Then you just create a hook and you use the screen size. So whenever you're doing things like that, it will update the number of the screen size, right? It will tell you, okay, your width right now is 600 pixel or whatever. So it's something very, very useful. And people that code in React today, they prefer the hook approach. So if you're ever planning on doing a front-end development and doing React, you will see that a lot, right? And there is very simple rules. Well, hooks can only be called inside React function components. So you cannot call hooks in, like, I don't know, it can be TS file or like a class component, or no, it should be in a React function component. And a React function component, once again, it's this. It's what we created here. This is a function component, function that returns JSX. And they can only be called at the top level of a component, like obviously, like we did here, right? We put our state first, so top level, we do our state. If we have a custom hook, we call it here. Even the code, it will be more clear. And the third thing is hooks cannot be conditional. And what that means is that, well, you cannot decide to call a hook sometimes and not call it in other times, right? You always, it's there. If you think of it as like an anchor or something that you're just sticking into your component, right? Like an anchor you have here, and you stick that into your component, and whenever data changes or whatever changes in the hook, it will update your component and tells them, okay, this thing changed. So yeah, that's it. That's all you guys need to know for now. No need to go into more details and complicate stuff. It's really simple, and I prefer to keep it simple, especially if you're starting to do React. But my personal advice, it would be, if you guys are planning to do front-end development, I would really recommend doing React. It's very popular, it's very fast, it's very performant. There's a lot of jobs out there seeking React developers. Also, you can have a decent salary with that. You can work remotely, it's just so cool. And also, you can always see what you build doing front end. So there is like it's not very code like guys doing backend. I have nothing wrong with backend, but I think front end is cool for that. If you're more of like a hybrid person, you want to do like some design and stuff like this. And while using React, because also you can, if you ever want to switch to mobile development, let's say, want to do like cross-platform things. I'm not talking about like Swift and Java and Kotlin and things like that, but if you want to like build apps for Android, iOS, and all that, you can use React Native. And React Native is a bit different, but it's kind of the same thing. It uses the exact same concepts as React. So if you're like familiar with React, if you know how to code in React, then you'll probably be able to code in React Native, and then you'll be able to do application for native and web application for the browser. All right, that was pretty much it. Thank you guys for participating. I hope you liked the information that you had today. I hope that you have better understanding of React now. And if you guys, have any questions, you can always tell me. We can take like 5 minutes or something to answer them. Thank you, guys. All right. No problem. No problem, guys. I hope you liked it. All right. So I'll let the host, if you want to say a few words on this.
Yeah, thank you, Ahmed, for the workshop. It was really great. It was really engaging. I'm sure everyone really loved it just based on how many thank yous there are in the chat. So I will stop recording now.